Heartwarming discovery, lonely rancher exposed to incredible widow's voice after years of silence. Hank sat on the porch of his sprawling Texas ranch, the sun dipping low on the horizon, casting a golden hue over the dusty land. A gentle breeze whispered around him, but silence still reigned in his heart. It had been 3 years since he lost Mary to cancer, and he felt the weight of absence in every creak of the wood beneath him. The laughter and joy he once shared with her had long faded, replaced by an aching loneliness that echoed through the empty corners of his life. Neighbors spoke of Hank fondly, remembering the warmth and laughter he used to bring to their gatherings. Yet, the rancher had become a mere shadow, retreating into isolation amongst his cattle, the isolation wrapped around him like an old worn blanket. In the nearby town of Meadow Creek, the air was thick with nostalgia. At Ben's barbecue, friends reminisced, bonding over tales of times past when Hank and Mary would sway together under starry skies, joy blooming like the wildflowers in spring. But Hank rarely ventured into town now. He preferred the company of the wind and the solitude of the sprawling land, even as whispers of love and friendship faded into the background. Then came Clara, a newcomer in town, with a voice that could pierce through the thickest silence. Drawn to the old church that stood at the heart of the town, she organized singing nights to breathe life into its forgotten walls. Though her heart was heavy with grief from losing her husband, her voice rose like a phoenix, coaxing the townsfolk from their hiding places. Each note rang clear, breaking the suffocating silence that had enveloped them all. And with every song, emotions once buried began to bubble to the surface. One evening, Hank found himself inexplicably drawn to the sound of Clara's singing drifting on the wind. The haunting notes wrapped around him, pulling him toward the church as if by an invisible thread. He stood at the entrance, hidden in the shadows, absorbing the warmth radiating from the gathering. Her voice was rich with pain and hope, lighting a fire in the corners of his heart that he thought had long gone cold. Memories of Mary flooded back. He could almost hear her laughter harmonizing with Clara's voice. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But just as hope began to blossom inside him, disaster struck. A fierce storm rolled through Meadow Creek, dark clouds swallowing what little light remained. The wind howled with ferocity, uprooting trees and shaking homes. Hank watched from his porch, terror gripping him as he saw daylight disappearing behind the ominous gray. As the tempest raged, he wrestled with an internal battle. Could he step out of the heavy shadows cast by grief to rally his neighbors? In the wake of destruction, Hank stood at a crossroads. Would he join Clara to heal their broken community, or cling to the silent desolation that had felt so familiar for too long? Torn between the ghost of his past and the possibility of new beginnings, he felt the question hanging heavy in the air: would he find the courage to embrace connection once more? Hank watched the storm tear through the ranch with brutal intensity. The once familiar silhouette of trees was bent low, surrendering to the furious winds. It felt as though the storm was not just a force of nature, but a reflection of the turmoil roiling within him. He could retreat into the familiarity of his pain, or he could face the uncertainty of reaching out, not just for himself, but for the entire town. As the rain pelted down, drenching the parched earth, a realization began to bloom in his heart he had spent too long hiding. The haunting notes of Clara's voice had pierced the solace of his grief, and now, he felt a flicker of responsibility. People relied on one another, especially during hard times, and it was time he reclaimed a part of his old self, the Hank that brought people together. He made up his mind and sprang from his seat. The storm screamed outside, but the familiar weight of grief was tempered by an unfamiliar spark of determination. Hank dashed inside to grab his old leather jacket. It was worn but felt right, like a swing on a Sunday afternoon. He stepped out again, the rain splattering against him like a baptism of sorts, and sprinted toward the heart of Meadow Creek. As he reached the church, he found it locked tight, the windows fogged with the breath of panic outside. But he could hear Clara's voice rising above the howl of the wind, a beacon guiding him through the chaotic night. Hank pounded on the door, desperation fueling his fists. "Clara! It's Hank! Open up!" Moments felt like hours as he waited, drenched and shivering. Then he heard the sound of a bolt sliding back, and the door creaked open. Clara stood there, her hair wild, eyes wide with surprise and worry.
Hank, what are you doing out here?
I came to help, he said, breathless.
I can't just sit back anymore. We need to get everyone together. The storm, it's not just outside. Her expression softened as she stepped back to let him in. I was hoping you'd come. I thought I'd lost everyone.
I thought you're not alone, he interrupted, sensing a shared understanding of pain.
Let us gather the community. We can help each other through this.
Together, they began to rally the townsfolk, starting with the ones already at the church. Clara's voice was lifted in sounds of comfort, where hope felt like the only light in the dark chaos. People trickled in, with fearful yet grateful expressions, finding solace in the shared space. As the songs flowed, Hank and Clara moved from one person to the next, lending hands and words of encouragement. The warmth of their gathering began to dissolve the shadows that had cloaked them for so long. Laughter mingled with music, the town's heartbeat returning in the harmony of their voices and the steady rhythm of hope. But just as things began to feel right again, an unexpected sound shattered the harmony. An ominous crack echoed in the distance, louder than the howling wind, sending a ripple of fear through the assembly. Hank's heart raced as he exchanged worried glances with Clara, his protective instincts surging.
What was that?
She whispered, hardly masking her dread. Let us check it out, he replied, steeling himself for whatever awaited outside. With the storm still raging, they stepped back into the tempest, unsure of what awaited them but knowing they had to confront it together.
What could be waiting for them in the darkness? Would this battle strengthen their bond, or tear their fragile connection apart? Hank pushed the door open, stepping out into the storm.
The wind howled, snatching at his jacket and sending icy splashes of rain against his face. Behind him, Clara's presence was a steadying force, her fear palpable yet tempered by her determination. Together, they moved cautiously, peering through the sheets of rain that slashed across their vision.
What do you think it was?
Clara asked, her voice barely rising above the roaring wind. I'm not sure, Hank admitted, scanning the darkened horizon. But it came from the direction of the old barn. The barn had always stood strong, a constant through the seasons. But now, in this storm, it felt like a giant shadow looming over them. With each step, they pressed forward, hearts pounding not just from the fear of what lay ahead, but from the hope that they could face whatever it was together. As they drew closer, the crack sounded again, sharper, more desperate.
It felt almost like an anguished wail, making Hank shiver.
We need to hurry, he urged Clara, and they broke into a run when they reached the barn. Flickering light peeked through the gaps in the wood. A sense of urgency flooded through Hank as they pushed the heavy door open. Inside, the smell of damp hay mingled with something else, a hint of smoke, laced with panic. The sight before them sent a jolt through Hank's chest. A few townsfolk were gathered, desperately attempting to control a flickering lantern whose flame threatened to go out. Henry, the blacksmith, was trying to beat out a small fire that had begun to creep along a pile of old straw.
Get some buckets! Hank shouted, springing into action.
Clara was right by his side, grabbing a couple of empty feed buckets nearby. They filled them with rainwater, pouring it over the flames just as another figure joined them. Mr. Morris, the town's retired sheriff. With determined teamwork, they managed to subdue the fire, but not without a few singed edges and frayed nerves. As the last wisp of smoke drifted away, a collective sigh of relief filled the barn. The townsfolk looked exhausted but relieved, their camaraderie instinctively bubbling to the surface. Clara placed a hand on Hank's shoulder, her face glowing in the lantern's light. I can't believe we did it, she whispered, her smile breaking through the lingering tension.
Hank felt warmth radiate through him.
It felt good to be part of the solution, no longer just an observer of the storm. We're stronger when we're together, he replied, his heart swelling with a newfound sense of purpose. But just then, the old barn groaned under the weight of the storm outside, and a shuddering noise echoed through the rafters above. Hank looked up, fear catching in his throat.
Everyone, stay back.
Without warning, a wooden beam splintered, sending debris crashing down. Hank instinctively pulled Clara toward him, shielding her as they hit the floor just as the beam fell. Moments passed, the world around them a chaotic blur of rain and dust. When Hank opened his eyes again, the barn was silent. Clara's eyes were wide, their faces only inches apart. Are you okay? She asked, breathless. He nodded, his pulse racing.
But they both knew the night wasn't over.
The storm still raged outside, and it was clear that this wasn't the end of their struggles. New challenges loomed, something was changing within Hank. He felt a strength that had been dormant for far too long, igniting in the midst of fear.
We need to find everyone. There might be more who need us.
With a firm grip on Clara's hand, they made their way toward the barn door. What awaited them beyond the shelter of the barn was uncertain, but together, they could face anything the storm had in store. As they stepped outside, the wind howled louder than before, and Hank's heart raced with both trepidation and hope.
What awaited them in the heart of that storm? Would their connection to each other survive the impending challenges, or would the darkness tear them apart?
The rain pelted down like 1,000 tiny fists, each drop cold and heavy as Hank and Clara stepped back into the tempest. The wind clawed at their clothes, the darkness swirling around them. Yet there was something exhilarating about facing the fury together. Their breath mingled in the damp air, steadying each other's nerves as they stepped away from the echoes of the barn. "I think we should head toward the creek," Clara shouted over the din, her eyes scanning the shifting shadows.
"People might be trapped down there." Hank nodded, adrenaline coursing through him.
The creek was usually a safe spot, but tonight, with the storm, it could be treacherous.
"Let South stick close."
He tightened his grip on her hand, feeling the warmth of her presence amidst the chaos. They took off toward the gushing sound of the creek, the path churned to mud beneath their feet. Hank's heart hammered as they raced against time, each step a mix of fear and fierce resolve.
"What are we even looking for?"
Clara shouted as they slipped and steadied themselves on their feet.
"Anyone who might need help." Hank replied. "We can't leave them behind."
When they reached the water's edge, the sight was terrifying.
The creek had swelled, water roiling and racing fast, threatening to spill over its banks.
A flicker of movement caught Hank's eye.
"Over there."
He pointed toward a cluster of trees, where he could glimpse something struggling against the rising water. They burst forward, the roar of the creek drowning out all other sounds. As they neared the trees, they spotted a figure, a woman clinging to a branch, her face pale against the dark water rushing around her.
"Hang on!" Clara cried out, rushing forward.
Hank moved to stop her, his instincts screaming for caution, but Clara's determination ignited a fire in him as well. They couldn't let her drown.
"Grab onto something!"
Hank shouted, reaching out as they both moved closer to the edge of the creek. The woman looked up, panic in her eyes as the branch shifted beneath her.
"I can't hold on much longer," she gasped, desperation straining her voice. "Just hold on,"
Clara urged, a fierce spirit coursing through her as she lunged forward, grabbing a nearby stick to extend toward the woman. Hank's heart raced as he braced himself, bending down to secure his footing.
"I've got you. Just reach for Clara."
After what felt like forever, the woman grasped the stick, her fingers trembling. Clara pulled with all her might, while Hank scrambled to find a more stable hold. The water churned, angry and wild, but they managed to get the woman to the trembling ground. She collapsed to the earth, gasping for breath, relief washing over her.
Clara knelt beside her, rubbing her back gently. "You're safe now, it's okay."
Hank backed away, catching his breath, pride swelling in him as he watched Clara comfort the stranger. That tiny moment of connection forced him to realize the depth of what they had just done together. They were indeed stronger, not just as individuals, but as a team. "Thank you," the woman said between breaths, her voice shaky but laced with gratitude. "I thought I'd be swept away. Let us get you out of here," Hank said, his heart still pounding. He glanced back at Clara, determination flickering in their eyes. Suddenly, an unsettling howl tore through the air, louder than the storm, a cry that echoed deep and unnatural.
Hank's gut clenched. "What was that?" Clara's eyes widened, echoing his shock. "I don't know, but we might not be alone here."
As the echo of the growl faded, a new kind of fear settled in Hank's stomach. They had saved one life, but what other dangers lurked in the shadows? With a shared look of determination, they took a single step forward. What other horrors would they face before this night was over? The howl hung in the air like a ghost, dark and crackling with tension. Hank's heart raced, and he exchanged a worried glance with Clara. The storm was relentless, but it was the ominous sound that sent a chill down his spine.
do you think?
Clara whispered, fear creeping into her voice. Hank shook his head, unwilling to give voice to the thought that had sprung to life. They had come here to save a life, not to lose their own.
We need to stay focused.
He turned back to the woman, still catching her breath on the muddy bank.
Can you stand?
With a shaky nod, she pushed herself up, leaning heavily on Clara for support. I owe you both so much, she gasped, but we can't stay.
Whatever that was, we need to get out of here.
Right, Hank affirmed, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the vision of the swirling waters attacking them, but the thought of that wild cry made the urgency sharper. They had to move together. They set off along the bank, keeping low and staying alert. The rain had soaked through their clothes, chilling them to the bone, but all Hank could think about was reaching safety.
Let us get to the farmhouse,
he urged. It was a familiar landmark, one that promised both refuge and warmth.
The woman's breaths were labored as she leaned into Clara's side.
I feel like I'm in a nightmare, she said weakly.
What was that sound?
I don't know, Clara replied through gritted teeth, but we'll figure it out.
Just keep going.
The farther they moved from the creek, the more the storm wove a shroud around them. Visibility dropped, and the roar of the wind nearly drowned out any chance of hearing another sound. A few feet ahead, the side of a low fence came into view, marking the rise to the farmhouse.
Relief surged through Hank like a current.
Almost there. But just as they reached the fence line, the noise came again, closer this time, more pronounced. It was followed by a rustling in the bushes, a deep growl that sent dread tumbling down Hank's spine.
What was that? Clara said, her voice trembling. I don't know, but we can't stop now. Hank gripped the woman's arm tighter. Just stay close and move quickly.
They hurried toward the farmhouse, but before they could reach the porch, a silhouette emerged from the shadows. A large, hulking figure stood there, drenched but terrifying. Its eyes gleamed in the dark. Hank felt Clara's grip tighten on his arm, fear flooding the space around them.
Stay back,
he shouted, stepping in front of Clara and the woman instinctively, heart pounding.
The figure paused, then, almost unexpectedly, it spoke. I'm not going to hurt you.
Hank's breath hitched.
What are you?
Who are you?
I'm just lost.
Like you, the figure replied, voice shaky but clear amid the chaos.
It's not safe here. Hank hesitated, the tension crackling in the air.
His instincts screamed to flee, but something in the stranger's tone struck a chord of familiarity.
What do you mean? I heard the howl, too.
It's been hunting, the figure said, stepping closer, allowing the meager light from the farmhouse to reveal a face he recognized despite the wild hair and grime.
I've been watching the edge of the woods ever since it came. I thought it would pass, but it's back now. The storm woke it. Clara looked to Hank, eyes wide with uncertainty.
We can't trust him, but a flicker of understanding sparked in Hank's mind.
Wait, you're the rancher from down the road. Why didn't you warn anyone?
The man opened his mouth to speak, but they were interrupted by the howl echoing across the darkness, rising above the thunder.
Run! Hank shouted.
There was no time to think, they had to head for safety now. As they fled toward the safety of the farmhouse, that haunting howl behind them grew sharper, a reminder that the storm was the least of their worries.
What had they unleashed?
With their hearts racing, they burst through the door, slamming it shut behind them, but Hank knew this was just the beginning.
What kind of terror awaited them inside?
They had to find answers before it was too late.
Inside, the farmhouse was a dim labyrinth of shadows and creaks. Thunder clapped outside, rattling the windows.
Hank pressed his back against the door, heart hammering as he scanned the room.
Is everyone okay?
He asked, checking on the woman who still leaned heavily against Clara. Her face was pale, the adrenaline wearing off to reveal fatigue and fear.
I think so, she stammered. But we can't stay here long. That thing, it's coming.
We'll figure it out, Clara replied firmly, glancing around at the cottage-like space. A flickering lantern at the far end cast dancing light on dusty shelves filled with mason jars and old farming tools.
We need to strategize. We can't just hide.
The rancher, who had identified himself as Ethan, stepped forward.
I'm not trying to scare you, but it's a predator. I've seen what it can do.
We should barricade the door and find a way to defend ourselves.
Hank nodded, his mind racing. Okay.
Let us push that old side table in front of the door. The more we can do to secure ourselves, the better.
Clara and the woman moved to help. Hank felt the urgency coursing through him.
As they pushed the heavy table into place, he noticed Clara's eyes darting around nervously, a frightened rabbit searching for an escape.
Hey, he whispered, leaning in. We will handle this together, right? We've come this far.
She met his gaze, and for a flicker of a moment, the fear melted away, replaced by a determined spark. Yeah, together, she promised softly, her voice getting steadier. With the door barricaded as best they could, they huddled near the lantern, listening intently. The wind howled outside, but beneath it, another noise began to emerge.
The unearthly howl.
It cut through the storm like a blade, rising and falling, almost melodic yet chilling at its core.
What does it want? The woman whispered. Her voice trembled as she hunched further into Clara's embrace.
I wish I knew, Hank muttered, trying to keep his own fear at bay.
We need to think clearly. Finding answers may be our only way through this. Answers?
Ethan's voice rang out, capturing all their attention.
The last time I heard that sound was when a woman went missing.
They said it was her spirit seeking those who disturbed its peace.
Hank's gut twisted at the thought. No one should be hunting their own kind.
So, it's a warning or a call for help?
Yes, Ethan replied. But out here, those two can often be the same.
Either way, it's trouble. Leaning against the wall, Hank tried to absorb the new information. Something shifted in the corners of his mind, a haunting connection to the bygone screams, the stories he heard growing up about the woods. There was something about those tales that blended seamlessly with the chilling howl now cutting through the storm.
What if it's looking for someone?
Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper.
Maybe we can help it, whatever it is. Risky, Ethan warned. What if it's a trap?
It might be our only chance at making sense of this, Hank said, feeling the weight of their choices press down heavily on him. But we have to be careful.
If it leads us deeper into danger, the howl echoed again, loud enough that they all instinctively flinched.
Then we need to make a decision, fast, Clara said, determination creeping back into her voice. As they shared fearful, uncertain glances, Hank pressed a hand to the table for reassurance. Suddenly, he felt the pulse of anger and courage rise in him like the rhythm of a beating heart, battling his fear.
Maybe they could turn the tide.
Let us listen and figure out what it wants, Hank said firmly. They gathered closer, hearts racing in synchronicity, aware that something monumental lay ahead. Yet despite the tension, an unexpected sense of purpose began to unfurl among them.
What if they could find a way to resolve this?
Just then, another howl pierced the air deeper, closer, like an invitation or a challenge. Whatever happens next, we stand together, Hank vowed, feeling a connection growing stronger among the group. But what they didn't know was that the moment of truth was fast approaching. They could either confront the unknown or let fear dictate their fate.
Would they take the risk?
The wind howled fiercely around them, almost as if trying to warn them away. But there was something in Hank's essence, some quiet determination that had awakened. Clara's grip on his arm tightened, and it grounded him, reminding him that they weren't alone. They were a team, three souls bound by fate, fear, and an inexplicable call. Ethan marched ahead, the lantern swaying in his hand, casting jittery light on the trees that loomed like specters. Each snap of a branch beneath their feet echoed ominously, but the howls in the distance pulled them onward, deeper into the abyss of the night.
Do you think it could be? Ethan started, his voice wavering slightly. I mean, a wolf? Or something worse?
Clara side-eyed Hank, worry etched on her face. We have to keep our minds open, she said softly. Whatever it is, it might need our help.
Just like we need it. Hank nodded.
He was reassured by her faith, even if his own fear still clawed at him like cold fingers. The howling had morphed again, more pleading this time. It echoed through the trees, wrapping itself around them like an embrace. Suddenly, a low growl emerged from the darkness, more guttural than any howl, causing a chill to run down Hank's spine. Clara stopped, her breath hitching in her throat. What was that? Her eyes widened as the lantern flickered once more. Keep moving, Ethan instructed, voice steady, but Hank could see a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. They pressed on, moving cautiously until the faint outline of a clearing opened up before them. The shadows danced as the lantern light spilled over the ground, revealing a damp patch of earth surrounded by gnarled trees. But more importantly, there stood a figure shimmering in the distance, its silhouette twisted and ornate, a contrast to the chaotic nature around them. Hank could feel his heart race. Was this what had been calling them? Is it real? Clara breathed, stepping forward with a wonder that lit her features. I don't know, Hank admitted, but something deep inside urged him to approach. Just then, the figure shifted, revealing bright, intelligent eyes glimmering in the lantern-esque glow. Hank, wait! Ethan called, reaching out. But Hank was already stepping closer, drawn like a moth to a flame. As he moved forward, something instinctual about the creature's energy calmed his nerves. It felt familiar. A bond he couldn't quite understand but instinctively recognized. What are you? Hank whispered, though he doubted the figure would answer. A voice, clear and haunting, cut through the air, above the battering storm. I am lost but seeking those who hear my song. Hank's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't a physical voice but something deeper, a resonance that vibrated through him, awakening forgotten memories and hidden hopes. There was pain in those words, but also an invitation. Clara gasped, and Hank turned to see her face alight with emotion. Do you hear that? Yes, he replied, breathless. It's beautiful. The figure took a step forward, its shape dissolving like mist, revealing not a monster but a creature of grace and sorrow. Hank felt a chill travel through him as he glanced at Ethan, who stood frozen, eyes wide. Is it possible? Ethan finally managed to say, voice barely above a whisper. The untamed howl transitioned into a melodic hum that filled the clearing, draping over them like a blanket. The howls weren't threats, they were longing, memories wrapped in a cry for connection. They weren't just linked by fear but also by this unspoken history. What are we supposed to do now? Hank asked, heart thrumming wildly. The figure tilted its head, a question hidden in its gaze. Suddenly, the hum shifted, and the figure busied itself in its dance, each movement enchanting. We need to share our stories, Clara breathed, understanding illuminating her features. The howl rose again, echoing their resolve. But as they stepped into the unknown, a shadow from the trees loomed darker than the rest. What did it mean? What lay ahead as they embraced this beautiful possibility of connection, in the midst of those unsure hearts? They began to unravel a truth that would change everything. The bond of lost souls was knitting together, but what could they uncover together? Would darkness follow or a path to healing? The clearing felt charged, alive with a tension that made Hank feel both vulnerable and exhilarated. He watched as the creature, its silhouette fading in and out like mist, danced with an elegance that stirred something deep inside him. Clara's eyes shone with wonder, and even Ethan, usually the skeptic, seemed mesmerized, but just beyond the light of the lantern, an ominous shape moved. A dark mass slithered between the trees, a stark contrast against the shimmering figure. Hank's pulse quickened, fear mixing uneasily with the beauty that surrounded them. What is that? Clara breathed, instinctively leaning closer to Hank. Her voice sliced through the tension that hung in the air. Hank, step back, Ethan urged, taking a cautious step toward the shadow. We don't know what that is. The creature's enchanting dance faltered as it sensed the emerging threat, eyes turning toward the darkness. There was no more song, no more sweetness, just a palpable sense of foreboding hanging overhead like storm clouds. Please, don't go. Hank whispered toward the figure. The connection they shared felt fragile, teetering on the brink of something profound. In an instant, the shadow materialized, a monstrous shape with a wild, frantic energy that clashed with the ethereal creature. It was a wolf, but so much more a beast of nightmares clad in a coat blacker than the night itself. What do you want? Clara shouted, her voice shaking with fear. But even as she spoke, there was a defiance in her tone, a challenge to the unknown. The wolf paused, its gaze fixating on Hank. A recognition flickered briefly in its eyes, a depth of understanding that startled him.
A connection. But what did it mean? Get away from him! Ethan shouted, raising the lantern defiantly. The light illuminated the creature's surroundings, causing the wolf to rear back, yet its gaze widened with curiosity. Hank felt an urge to bridge the gap between them. He stepped forward, trying to pierce through the fear.
"It's okay," he said softly, holding his hand out.
"I know you're not here to hurt us." The shadow stiffened, trapped in a paradox of instincts, the predatory urge battling a hidden vulnerability.
The melody, which had faded away, began to stir again in the air, this time laced with urgency. The creature regarded this rising tension before responding with a reassuring hum, beckoning both Hank and the wolf toward a shared truth. As the wolf tilted its head, an almost human expression flickered across its face. Hank could feel it, the pain, the loneliness echoed in those deep-set eyes. A howl, not of anger but of longing, slipped from the wolf's throat, harmonizing awkwardly with the haunting melody from the figure.
"What is happening?"
Clara asked, her voice trembling, caught between wonder and dread. The creature of grace sought to connect, its movements encouraging the wolf, as if nudging it toward the light. Hank's heart beat fiercely, the urgency in the air igniting a flicker of hope inside him.
Perhaps the darkness wasn't their enemy.
Maybe it was just as lost, just as searching as they were. But before he could utter another word, the wolf lunged, a blur of motion in the dim light aimed directly at him. Hank's instincts roared to life, but in that split second, he found himself standing resolute. This wasn't just a predator, it was an ally, perhaps.
It simply had to find its footing. "Hank!"
Clara cried, and he felt her pull back, but he remained where he was, heart thrumming. "Stay." The wolf halted inches from him, chest heaving, and they shared a moment of truth, broken souls converging under the weight of the night. Then, everything changed. The figure reached out, its hand glowing with warmth that radiated through the shadows. The howls deepened, wrapping around them, urging both the creature and Hank to listen, to finally understand the song that bound them all. What lay ahead was uncertain, but together, perhaps, they could heal. As Hank held the wolf's gaze, he understood, they were all searching for something light amid the shadows, but just as hope began to stir, a thunderous growl erupted from the darkness behind them, shattering the fragile moment. What was hidden within those trees? What other secrets remained to be unveiled? The night was far from over. Would they find the courage to confront what lurked beyond the light? Would it lead to the connection they sought, or to their undoing? The air was thick with expectancy as Hank, Clara, and Ethan stood in the clearing, hearts pounding in unison with the rhythm of the storm. The howl from the ominous wolf echoed against the trees, and Hank felt the weight of its burden press heavily upon them. Lives intertwined, souls seeking solace amid chaos. Everything felt poised on the edge of revelation, yet a sense of dread loomed just as large.
"Hank, don't!" Clara's plea sliced through the tension, but his heart urged him to forge ahead.
He felt drawn to this creature, a shared recognition binding them together, lost souls, all yearning for something beyond the pain. "I know you're hurting," Hank said softly, lowering his gaze, hoping to soothe the wild creature before him.
"We're all searching for connection. Just like you."
The wolf, its fur slick with rain, hesitated, eyes flickering with uncertainty.
Was it fear or understanding?
"Please, just let us help you," Hank added, willing the bond to spark anew between them. And then, from the depths of the shadows, the ethereal figure that had first beckoned them forward stepped closer, shimmering with light. "Come," its voice flowed like a melody, charged with warmth. The wolf's breath quickened, anticipation marking its gaze as if recognizing a deeper calling. Suddenly, the growl pierced the night again, a reminder of lurking threats. All at once, the balance was disrupted. The darkness shifted, and Hank felt a surge of panic as another shape emerged, larger than before, filled with rage, charging toward them like an avalanche.
"Run!"
Clara shouted, grabbing Hank's arm, but something in him rebelled against the urge to flee.
"No!" Hank dug his heels into the ground. "We need to stand together. All of us."
"But what if it comes for us?"
Clara's eyes were wide, darting between him and the surge of shadows threatening their small circle of light.
"We'll face it. The creature is lost, just like us.
We can't abandon it."
Hank's voice rang out with fierce determination, igniting a fire in his chest. Ethan set the lantern firmly on the ground, its flickering light illuminating the tension in the clearing as he proclaimed, "Then let us show it we're not afraid. We'll protect each other." The wolf growled, not in threat but in solidarity as decisions were made in that split second. They shifted closer together, waxed shadows and swirling light blending at their feet. "Together!" Clara echoed, her spirit lifting. The monstrous figure lurched forward, but just as it approached, the wolf lifted its head, emitting a howl that resonated with the yearning of the night. The haunting melody entwined with their own emotions, creating a symphony of strength. "Let us do this together!" Hank shouted, the words unleashing a wave of courage that swept over them. They stood firm as a coalition, hearts racing as the storm raged around them. What happened next was uncertain, a blend of hope and fear that tightened the air like a drum. And then, as if reflecting their unity, the larger shadow hesitated, almost recoiling before the touch of flickering light breaking up its form. The howl transitioned, layered and rich, intertwining with the energy of the storm. It felt like the night itself was holding its breath, waiting to see if they could bridge the gap between fury and understanding. The wolf took a step closer to the imposing figure, eyes locked onto its gaze. Something shifted. The growl evolved, the creature's posture uncoiled in recognition just as the tempest halted, creating a moment of stillness. Hank felt a rush of connection ignite within him. It was the ancient bond they all shared, some primal instinct fostering understanding. "You're not alone," he murmured, conviction surging in his words. "Neither are we." With each second that passed, the shadows began to recede, the night infused with tentative hope. The large figure owner of the formidable growl hesitated still, caught between its primal nature and the plight of lost souls before it. Then, unexpectedly, the wolf stepped forward, nudging its massive head closer to the bristling creature. It was an appeal, an invitation to accept the gathering warmth and shared pain. Suddenly, like a dam giving way, the larger figure let out a heart-wrenching howl, one laced with sorrow, echoing through the woods, mingling with the raindrops. The night shuddered as an understanding washed over them, a repressed longing for unity bubbling to the surface. Clara squeezed Hank's arm tightly, tears glistening in her eyes as she witnessed the transcendence taking place before them. Their burdens were being shared, the fear shifted into fragmentation, and something beautiful began to emerge from it, connection woven from threads of understanding. As if guided by an unseen force, they began to walk toward one another, the trio of friends and the two creatures moving in unison. Hearts beating to the same rhythm, they encircled one another, a protective embrace forming that shattered the remaining darkness between them. And then the storm began to dissipate, fading like the fear that had plagued them for so long. The clouds parted, ushering in beams of soft, hopeful light that danced across the clearing, illuminating the faces of those who had confronted their pasts together. In that moment, wrapped in each other's warmth, memories of losses slipped away like shadows, revealing the incredible power of love, community, and the strength that arises when souls unite in harmony. The world they entered afterwards felt brighter, the once desolate ranch full of promise. Each step they took echoed with the whispers of new beginnings. Hank, Clara, and Ethan turned back toward the path leading home, a lingering spark of connection in their hearts and laughter spilling forth. No longer alone, this chapter wasn't just a conclusion to a story, but the beginning of a new journey, as each heart beat stronger than ever, reminders that the shadows hint at the light waiting to break free. Let us embrace the new chapters waiting for us ahead, and you can be part of our journey too. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep these heartfelt stories alive. Comment your reactions and feelings about this incredible ending. And don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Only true fans understand how important it is to support the channel through these actions.